Jonathan Reed, a self-made millionaire, sat alone in his office, gazing out over the city skyline. From this height, everything seemed so small: buildings, cars, people. In his rise to wealth, he'd learned many lessons about people and power. Trust, however, was a luxury he couldn't afford. His experiences with betrayal, deceit, and broken promises had hardened him. Over the years, he'd surrounded himself with luxury, yet he was painfully aware that his vast fortune couldn't buy genuine relationships. The more he succeeded, the more isolated he felt, building walls higher than any skyscraper around him. One chilly evening, he found himself craving a break from his meticulously ordered life. Seeking something different, he decided to leave behind his luxury vehicles and fine dining. Instead, he drove to a modest diner on the outskirts of town, a place far from his usual haunts. The diner was simple, with vinyl booths and the faint smell of coffee and fried food filling the air. It was the kind of place he hadn't visited in years, reminding him of simpler times before wealth had wrapped him in suspicion and solitude. As he slid into a booth by the window, a young waitress approached him. Her name tag read Emma. She greeted him with a warm smile, her eyes friendly and unaffected by his tailored suit and designer watch. Unlike most people he encountered, she didn't seem to care who he was or what he was worth. She treated him with the same kindness and respect she showed to every other diner. Jonathan felt something stir within him, an unusual feeling of comfort. After placing his order, he quietly observed her as she moved through the diner, serving patrons with grace and genuine warmth. She didn't appear jaded or weary, despite the obvious hardships she might have faced. Her simplicity and honesty intrigued him, sparking an idea that tugged at the edges of his mind. He wondered if Emma's kindness and integrity were genuine or if, like many others, it would crumble under the weight of temptation. With a slight smile, he crafted a small test. When he finished his meal, he purposely left his wallet on the table and excused himself to the restroom. The wallet was thick with cash and credit cards, an easy prize for anyone who wished to take advantage. He lingered near the restroom door, heart pounding slightly, half expecting to return to an empty table. The tests he devised in his business dealings often revealed people's true intentions. Would this be any different? Returning to the table, he was initially startled to find the wallet missing. His suspicions seemed confirmed. Had she taken it? He felt a flicker of disappointment and frustration. But before he could dwell on it, Emma appeared at his side, holding out the wallet with a gentle smile. "I think you left this on the table," she said, her tone casual and kind. Relief washed over him, mixed with a twinge of surprise. Here was a person who, despite an opportunity to take advantage, had chosen the honest path. But Jonathan wasn't convinced yet. He had long held the belief that everyone had a price, that given the right circumstances, even the most trustworthy would falter. The following evening, he returned to the diner, deciding to conduct his experiment once more. This time, he engaged Emma in conversation, asking her about her life and her aspirations. She was open and warm, speaking with quiet resilience about her journey. She shared how she was putting herself through school and supporting her family, struggling after her father's recent passing and her mother's ongoing illness. Despite her hardships, she spoke with an optimism that was rare, and he found himself drawn to her sincerity. After finishing his meal, he repeated his earlier test, leaving his wallet on the table again. This time, he slipped outside to watch through the window, his heart racing as he observed Emma's reaction. She spotted the wallet, glanced around, and paused, as if debating what to do. His pulse quickened. Perhaps this was the moment she'd give in. But to his astonishment, she picked up the wallet, placed it safely behind the counter, and went back to her work as if nothing unusual had happened. When he returned to retrieve his wallet, she handed it over with the same composed and kind expression. Jonathan felt a mixture of frustration and admiration. How could someone with her struggles remain so steadfast, so principled? Each time she resisted temptation, he found himself respecting her more. Yet, the skeptic in him still wanted proof that this wasn't just a facade. Over the next few weeks, Jonathan became a regular at the diner. Each visit, he devised new tests, leaving cash under his plate, slipping his watch in the napkin holder, even abandoning a check tucked between the menu pages. Every time, Emma returned his belongings without hesitation, showing no sign of being swayed by the potential windfall. One evening, after another failed attempt to catch her slipping, Jonathan overheard a conversation between Emma and a fellow waitress. She was discussing her mother's deteriorating health and the mounting medical bills. Her voice broke as she admitted that she might have to quit school to care for her mother full-time. Jonathan felt a pang of guilt. He had been testing her honesty while she silently faced these overwhelming burdens. In an attempt to ease her situation, he left a generous tip that night, a few $100s in cash tucked under his receipt. When he returned later to check, he found that Emma had only taken the amount for his meal, leaving the rest behind. This final act of integrity broke through Jonathan's guarded heart. Emma had passed every test he could think of with dignity and grace, something he had rarely encountered in his wealth-driven world. Realizing her struggles and deeply moved by her character, Jonathan knew he wanted to help her. But he also wanted to ensure that his assistance wouldn't wound her pride. She was not someone who would accept charity easily. She had a quiet dignity that made her resilient. Determined to support her in a way that would honor her integrity, Jonathan came up with a plan. The next evening, he arrived at the diner with a proposition. "Emma," he began, "I'm a businessman, and I'm in need of a reliable personal assistant. I've watched how you work, and I think you have all the qualities I need." He offered her a well-paid position, framing it as an opportunity for growth rather than an act of charity. Emma looked surprised, hesitant even, but after he reassured her that her honesty and work ethic were all the qualifications he required, she agreed, grateful for the chance to earn more for her family. As they shook hands on the arrangement, Jonathan couldn't help but feel a newfound respect and admiration for this young woman. Little did Emma know that she was about to change his life in ways he never expected, and in turn, he was about to play a role in fulfilling the dreams she had silently cherished. The transition from a humble diner to this sleek, corporate environment was a whirlwind for Emma. Though hesitant at first, she felt a growing excitement and sense of purpose. For years, she had worked tirelessly to support her family, putting aside her own dreams to make sure her mother received the care she needed. This new position was an unexpected blessing, one that offered her a glimmer of hope for a future she had almost forgotten she wanted. Her first day working for Jonathan began with a quiet nervousness, tempered by her determination to do well. As she entered his expansive office building, she couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The floors were polished to a mirror-like shine, and the walls were adorned with modern art pieces that spoke of Jonathan's refined taste and considerable wealth. It was a world away from the diner with its sticky booths and the hum of the coffee machine, yet Emma held her head high. She had faced far more daunting challenges than an unfamiliar environment. Jonathan greeted her warmly, a contrast to the reserved man she had come to know at the diner. He led her through the office, showing her where everything was and introducing her to key members of his team. Emma noticed how his employees looked at him with a mix of admiration and respect. He was clearly a man of influence, someone who commanded loyalty. But behind that respect, she sensed a faint wariness, as though they knew he could be a tough boss. Settling into her new role, Emma found herself quickly adjusting. She was efficient, organized, and intuitive, often anticipating Jonathan's needs before he voiced them. As days turned into weeks, she became his trusted assistant, managing his schedule, sorting through endless stacks of paperwork, and handling his communications. Yet, beneath her calm and composed exterior, Emma carried the weight of her own struggles. Though she now had a well-paying job, her mother's condition was worsening, and the medical bills continued to pile up. She juggled her responsibilities, working late into the night and using every spare moment to research affordable care options. One evening, as she sat at her desk organizing files, Jonathan approached her. She had grown accustomed to his brief nods and quiet respect. But tonight, his demeanor was different, thoughtful, almost vulnerable. "Emma," he began, "I wanted to thank you. You've made a real difference in my life. For years, I thought I could only rely on myself, but you've shown me that there are people out there who can be trusted." He paused, as if contemplating whether to say more. "It's been a long time since I felt this, connected to someone's integrity." Emma, taken aback, managed a small smile. "Thank you, Mr. Reed. It's just how I was raised, I suppose. My parents taught me that honesty is the foundation of everything. Without it, you're just pretending. And I've never wanted to live a life like that." Jonathan nodded, visibly moved by her words. Her straightforward honesty reminded him of a friend he once had, someone he hadn't thought about in years. "Your father sounds like he was a remarkable man." A flicker of sadness crossed her face. "He was. He passed away last year, but I still feel his presence every day. It's what keeps me going, even when things get tough." Jonathan felt a pang of guilt. He knew about her family's hardships, having overheard her conversation with the waitress at the diner. He realized that every test he had put her through had been one she had passed without hesitation, even when she was in desperate need herself. He had spent so much time looking for flaws in people, for that one crack in their facade, but Emma's integrity was unbreakable. It humbled him. As Emma continued to work diligently in her new role, she began to notice a side of Jonathan that few had seen. He was generous with his praise, though reserved in his personal life. She saw glimpses of the man behind the wealth, the man who had once struggled, much like she was now, to build something from nothing. The more she learned about his journey, the more she respected him. One day, as she was sorting through his files, she came across an old photograph tucked between two sheets of paper. It was faded and slightly torn, but the faces were unmistakable. There was Jonathan, much younger, standing next to a man who bore a striking resemblance to her late father. They were both smiling, arms slung around each other in camaraderie, dressed in business attire, but looking like two men who had shared a meaningful bond. Emma's heart raced as she held the photo, her mind reeling with questions. She hadn't known her father had any connection to Jonathan Reed. In fact, her father had never mentioned him at all. Was this the reason Jonathan had taken an interest in her? Had he known her father and felt some obligation toward her? Summoning her courage, she knocked on Jonathan's office door, holding the photo carefully in her hand. He looked up from his desk, eyebrows raised in curiosity. "Mr. Reed, I found this among your files," she said, handing him the picture. Jonathan's face softened as he gazed at the photo, his expression turning somber. "Ah, yes, your father and I were once very close. We started out in business together, in fact." Emma's voice wavered as she asked, "Why didn't you ever mention it?" Jonathan sighed, his gaze distant. "We had a falling out, one that I've regretted for years. Your father was a good man, Emma. He had a strength of character that I admired. But business, it has a way of creating rifts between people. We went our separate ways, and by the time I realized how much I valued his friendship, it was too late to repair the damage." Emma sat down, her heart heavy. It was surreal to think that her father, whom she had always viewed as a humble, kind-hearted man, had once shared a close friendship with someone as influential as Jonathan Reed. "I wish I'd known," she murmured. "He never spoke about you." Jonathan looked at her with a mixture of regret and respect. "I can't say I blame him. I wasn't the best friend. I was ambitious, driven, too focused on my own success to see the damage I was causing around me." The revelation hung between them, a poignant reminder of the hidden connections that bound people together in unexpected ways. Emma saw a new side to Jonathan that day, a man who, despite his success, carried the weight of past mistakes and broken relationships. And Jonathan, for the first time, felt a genuine sense of accountability toward someone other than himself. As the weeks passed, their bond grew deeper. Emma became not just an assistant, but a confidant, someone who listened without judgment and offered insights that surprised even him. She challenged him to see the world in a new light, one that wasn't tinted by suspicion and guardedness. One evening, as they were working late, Jonathan found himself opening up to her in a way he hadn't done in years. "You know, Emma," he began, "I've been thinking about the choices I've made. I spent so much of my life chasing after wealth and power, trying to prove something to myself, to everyone, really. But I lost people along the way, people who mattered." Emma looked at him, her eyes filled with compassion. "Sometimes it takes meeting someone who reminds you of what truly matters to bring things into focus." Jonathan nodded, deeply moved. "You're right. You've taught me more than you realize, Emma. I started out testing your honesty, but in the end, it was my own values that were being tested." That night, as she closed the office door behind her, Emma felt a surge of pride and a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She knew that her journey with Jonathan was only beginning, and that the lessons they were teaching each other would leave a lasting impact on both of their lives. Over the following weeks, Emma's life continued to transform, yet she kept her feet firmly on the ground. She felt a newfound sense of security, her financial worries easing little by little as her job with Jonathan provided her with enough to cover her mother's treatments and even start saving a bit for her own future. For the first time in years, Emma allowed herself to dream. Dreams that had long been set aside in the face of responsibility and hardship. Jonathan, meanwhile, was navigating his own personal transformation. Every interaction with Emma seemed to chip away at the layers of cynicism and distrust he had built around himself over the years. He found himself seeking her counsel on matters far beyond the typical scope of an assistant. Emma's straightforwardness and honesty grounded him, and he began to realize just how isolated he had allowed himself to become. One afternoon, as Emma was tidying up the papers on his desk after a long meeting, Jonathan stopped her with a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Emma," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it, "you've been such a steady presence in my life. I don't think I've properly expressed how much I value what you've brought into my world." Emma looked up, slightly startled by his vulnerability. "Mr. Reed," she said with a gentle smile, "you don't have to thank me. I'm just doing my job, and I'm grateful for the opportunity." Jonathan shook his head. "No, Emma. It's more than that. You've reminded me of things I'd almost forgotten. Things like loyalty, kindness, and integrity. These aren't just words, they're values you live by, and you've brought them into my life in a way I didn't expect." Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. "Thank you, Mr. Reed. That means a lot to me. I was raised to believe that if you live your life honestly, good things will come your way. My father always said, integrity is what you do when no one's watching." Jonathan looked away for a moment, seeming to reflect on her words. He nodded, as if silently acknowledging that she'd just captured a truth he hadn't embraced in years. In the quiet of the office, surrounded by the weight of their shared history and his past mistakes, Jonathan made a decision. That night, Jonathan couldn't sleep. He found himself pacing through his grand, empty home, each step echoing through rooms filled with the luxuries of success, but devoid of warmth. He thought back to the early days, before the money and power, when he and Emma's father had dreamt of changing the world together. They had shared ideals back then, ideals that had long since faded as ambition and greed took over. The memories made him ache with regret, and he knew it was time to confront the past. The following morning, Jonathan called Emma into his office. She entered with her usual calm demeanor, but something in his expression gave her pause. "Emma, I need to tell you something," he began, his voice tinged with a rare vulnerability. "There's more to my connection with your father than just an old friendship. We started out as business partners. Together, we had plans to build something meaningful. But as we grew, I lost sight of what mattered. I let my ambition cloud my judgment, and in the end, we had a falling out. He left the company, and I've always blamed myself for that." Emma listened, her face a mixture of sadness and understanding. "Mr. Reed, I had no idea. He never spoke about you or what happened between you two." Jonathan's face softened, a mix of regret and acceptance in his gaze. "I don't blame him. I wasn't the man I should have been back then. I became consumed by my drive for success, and I hurt people along the way, your father most of all. I've tried to make peace with it, but until you came into my life, I didn't realize how much I needed to truly confront my past." Emma took a deep breath, her hands clasped together as she processed his confession. She felt a pang of sorrow for both her father and Jonathan, who had clearly been carrying this burden alone. "Mr. Reed, I don't think my father ever held any resentment. He was a forgiving man, and he would have wanted you to forgive yourself." Jonathan's gaze softened further. "Thank you, Emma. You have no idea how much that means to me. But there's more. There's something I want to do, not just for you, but as a way to honor your father." Emma looked at him, curiosity mingling with apprehension. "What do you mean?" Jonathan reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a thick file. "This is a scholarship fund," he explained. "I want to start it in your father's name. It will be a fund to help young people like you, those who face hardships but work tirelessly to make a better life for themselves and their families. I know it won't erase the past, but I hope it can be a way to make things right." Emma's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. She had never expected such a gesture, and the weight of Jonathan's decision overwhelmed her. "Mr. Reed, I don't know what to say. This is incredible." He smiled softly, a genuine warmth in his eyes. "Emma, this is the least I can do. Your father's friendship meant a lot to me, and I failed to cherish it while he was here. But through you, I've had a second chance. A chance to see what true integrity looks like. This fund is my way of honoring the values he held dear, values you've reminded me of every day." Tears pricked the corners of Emma's eyes as she processed the enormity of Jonathan's gesture. It was more than a financial commitment. It was an acknowledgement of the legacy her father had left behind, and a testament to the impact he had made on Jonathan's life. The scholarship fund became a reality within weeks. Jonathan's wealth and connections made the process swift, and soon, young people from disadvantaged backgrounds were applying for the opportunity to pursue their dreams. Jonathan took an active role in selecting the recipients, consulting with Emma on each candidate and learning about their stories of resilience and determination. With each new application, Jonathan felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was no longer the man who saw people as stepping stones or potential threats. He was someone who understood the value of giving back, of building something that would outlast him. One afternoon, as they reviewed applications together, Emma turned to Jonathan with a grateful smile. "Mr. Reed, I can't thank you enough for this. You've changed so many lives already. And you've changed mine too." Jonathan looked at her, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and humility. "Emma, you've changed mine as well, more than you'll ever know." Their work on the scholarship fund brought them closer together, transforming their relationship into something resembling family. Jonathan's employees noticed the shift in him. He was kinder, more patient, and genuinely invested in the people around him. He had become the kind of man he had once only pretended to be. But beyond the scholarship fund, there was something else Jonathan wanted to do for Emma. One evening, after a particularly long day, he invited her to dinner, wanting to discuss something important. Over a quiet meal, he revealed his intentions. "Emma," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I want you to know that I consider you family. You've brought a light into my life that I didn't know I needed, and I want to make sure you're always taken care of." Emma looked at him, slightly confused but deeply touched. "Mr. Reed, I don't need anything more. You've already done so much." He shook his head, smiling. "This isn't about need. It's about gratitude and respect. I've added you as a partner in my will, Emma. It's my way of acknowledging the impact you've had on me and ensuring that your future is secure." Emma's eyes filled with tears, and she struggled to find words. She had never expected such generosity, and the thought of being so valued moved her deeply. "Mr. Reed, I don't know what to say. I'm overwhelmed." Jonathan reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You deserve this, Emma. You've shown me what true loyalty and kindness look like, and I want you to have a life filled with all the opportunities you've given up for others." As she squeezed his hand, Emma knew that her father would have been proud, not just of her, but of Jonathan too. In that moment, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace, knowing that their journey together had come full circle. In the weeks following Jonathan's announcement, Emma found herself both astonished and humbled by the generosity he had shown. The scholarship fund in her father's name was already creating a ripple effect in the community. Young people, who once felt their dreams were out of reach, were now given the resources to pursue education and training they had only imagined. Jonathan, who had once been skeptical of people's motives, was now reaching out personally to these students, learning their stories, and investing time in their development. Yet, despite the positive changes and the newfound closeness Emma shared with Jonathan, she couldn't ignore a lingering feeling. It was as if she was finally experiencing the life her father had once dreamed of for her. A life filled with possibilities, free from financial struggles. But there was a small voice inside her, a voice that reminded her that Jonathan's success was built on years of struggle, of overcoming hardship, and of mistakes that still haunted him. One crisp autumn afternoon, Emma found herself back at the modest diner where she had first met Jonathan. She ordered a cup of coffee and sat by the window, lost in thought. As she stirred her coffee, memories of her father surfaced, clear and vivid. His laugh, his calm demeanor, and the way he used to tell her, "Life's real wealth isn't in what you have, Emma. It's in how you make others feel." She had always believed that, and somehow, in her own way, she had managed to bring that philosophy into her life. A soft chime signaled the arrival of someone at the diner's entrance. She looked up, surprised to see Jonathan himself standing there. Dressed more casually than she was accustomed to, he gave her a gentle smile and joined her at the table. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Taking a break from all your hard work." Emma chuckled. "Just needed a bit of quiet, a moment to remember where I came from, you know." Jonathan nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I come here sometimes too," he admitted. "It reminds me of simpler times before life got complicated." They sipped their coffee in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Jonathan spoke. "Emma, I know I told you how much you mean to me, how much I value your honesty and kindness. But there's something I haven't told you, something I think it's time you knew." Emma looked up, curiosity and a hint of concern in her gaze. Jonathan took a deep breath. "When your father and I were young, we had big dreams, as you know. But it wasn't just business we built together. It was a vision of changing lives, of creating something that would outlast us. He believed in people in a way I couldn't, and when things fell apart between us, I convinced myself that it was his fault." He paused, his eyes growing distant. "Your father was the first person who ever called me out on my greed. He saw what I was becoming before I even realized it, and he tried to warn me. I didn't listen, of course. I was too focused on winning, on proving that I could conquer the world on my own. In the end, he walked away because he couldn't be a part of what I had turned our business into." Emma reached out, her hand covering his. "Mr. Reed, my father never spoke ill of you. Whatever happened, he must have forgiven you a long time ago." Jonathan's voice was thick with emotion. "Maybe. But I hadn't forgiven myself. Not until I met you and saw that same unwavering integrity in you. You've given me something precious, Emma. You've reminded me of the man I once aspired to be. And for that, I will always be grateful." They sat in silence, the weight of his words settling between them. Emma could feel the depth of Jonathan's regret, but also the transformation he had undergone. This was no longer the cold, calculated businessman she had met at the start. He was a man who had finally rediscovered his heart. As they left the diner, Jonathan suggested they take a walk. The autumn air was brisk, the leaves a riot of red and gold, crunching beneath their feet as they strolled through a nearby park. They talked about life, dreams, and how people often found themselves at crossroads, faced with decisions that defined them. Eventually, they sat on a bench overlooking a small pond, the late afternoon sun casting a warm glow over the water. "Emma," Jonathan began, breaking the comfortable silence, "there's something more I want to discuss with you." Emma turned to him, curiosity piqued. "I know you've been working as my assistant, but I want to offer you something more," he said, his gaze steady. "I want you to join me as a partner. I want you to help me rebuild the company with the values your father once stood for. Together, we could make it a place where people are valued, where integrity matters as much as profits." Emma's eyes widened, her heart racing. She hadn't expected this. Working with Jonathan had been fulfilling, but the thought of becoming a partner, of playing a pivotal role in reshaping the very foundation of his empire, it was overwhelming. "Mr. Reed, I mean, Jonathan, are you sure? I don't have any formal training in business. I wouldn't even know where to begin." Jonathan smiled. "Emma, you've already proven yourself more capable than most. What you lack in business experience, you make up for with character. That's something you can't learn in any school. And you'll have me to guide you." Emma felt a surge of excitement, but also a touch of fear. She glanced at the pond, her mind racing with possibilities. Could she really make a difference? Could she honor her father's legacy and help Jonathan create something meaningful? After a long pause, she looked back at him, a spark of determination in her eyes. "If I do this, I want us to commit to a set of principles, guiding values that shape everything we do. I want us to make decisions that put people first, that treat our employees like family, and that honor integrity above all." Jonathan's smile widened, pride shining in his eyes. "That's exactly what I had in mind, Emma. You have my word. We'll rebuild this company on a foundation of trust and respect." With her acceptance, a new chapter began for both of them. They spent the following days drafting a mission statement, writing down the core values that would define their partnership and the future of Jonathan's empire. They implemented policies that prioritized employee welfare, creating scholarships, mentorship programs, and initiatives that uplifted the community. The changes sparked whispers in the corporate world as news of Jonathan Reed's transformation spread. He was no longer the cutthroat businessman who valued profits above all. He had become a philanthropist, a mentor, and a leader who was willing to invest in people. One evening, as they reviewed the progress of their initiatives, Jonathan handed Emma an envelope. "This is for you," he said, his voice gentle. Emma opened it, her eyes widening as she saw a personal letter from him, alongside a framed photograph of her father and Jonathan from their early days in business. In the letter, Jonathan had written, "Dear Emma, you've given me a second chance, a chance to honor your father's memory and the values he instilled in both of us. Thank you for being my partner, my friend, and my moral compass. Together, we're building something that will stand the test of time, and I know he would be proud. With all my gratitude, Jonathan." Tears filled Emma's eyes as she read the words. She looked up at Jonathan, who gave her a small, understanding nod. "Your father was a great man, Emma, and because of you, his legacy will live on," he said softly. In that moment, Emma felt a profound sense of peace. She had come so far from the young woman struggling to make ends meet, and now she was part of something greater, something built on trust, resilience, and the values her father had lived by. As they locked up the office that night, both of them knew that their journey was only beginning. Together, they were not only building a business, but a legacy that would inspire generations to come. The journey that Emma and Jonathan embarked on together quickly became more than either of them had anticipated. As they reshaped the company from the ground up, they encountered resistance and skepticism from the old guard. Executives and board members who had been with Jonathan through his most ruthless years. They struggled to understand why he was suddenly willing to slow down the pace of growth, invest more in people than in products, and pour resources into community initiatives that seemed, to them, unnecessary. But Jonathan remained steadfast, with Emma by his side. He attended every board meeting, fielded every question, and countered every argument with a calm assurance that surprised even himself. Emma had ignited a purpose in him that transcended wealth or success. He wanted to leave a legacy that went beyond the balance sheets, and as each day passed, he grew more confident that this new path was the right one. However, the change wasn't just met with resistance from within. The media picked up on Jonathan's transformation, dubbing it the billionaire's conscience crisis. Some articles praised his efforts, but others were scathing, accusing him of trying to repair a tarnished reputation with superficial gestures of philanthropy. Tabloids cast doubt on his intentions, insinuating that his partnership with Emma was more than professional, and that he was exploiting her innocence to reinvent himself as a benevolent businessman. Emma, who was already juggling her new responsibilities, found herself thrust into an uncomfortable spotlight. Reporters sought her out, trying to get a glimpse into her personal life and probing for any information that would fuel their headlines. Cameras followed her outside her modest apartment, and strangers whispered as she passed by on her way to work. The attention was overwhelming, and she found herself questioning if she could handle the pressure that came with her role. One evening, after a particularly intense meeting where a few board members had voiced their doubts about the new direction, Jonathan noticed Emma looking weary. She was sitting alone in her office, the city lights casting a soft glow through the window, her face etched with worry as she leafed through a stack of documents. Jonathan knocked softly on her door. "Mind if I join you?" Emma looked up, startled, and managed a small smile. "Of course not. I could use the company." He entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee, and handed one to her as he took a seat across from her desk. They sat in silence for a moment, the familiar warmth of the coffee easing the tension in the room. "You've been carrying a lot lately," he said gently, his gaze full of empathy. "I didn't mean for things to get this hard for you." Emma sighed, staring into her coffee. "I knew this wouldn't be easy, Jonathan. But sometimes it feels like everything is too much. The media, the board, even the people who doubt we can really make a difference. It all feels so overwhelming. I didn't expect to feel this. Exposed." Jonathan leaned forward, his voice earnest. "Emma, I understand how you feel. When I started this journey, I didn't anticipate the scrutiny or the backlash. But the way you've handled everything, you've been nothing short of remarkable. I don't want you to feel like you're doing this alone. We're in this together." Emma gave him a grateful smile, but her eyes were still clouded with concern. "I'm just afraid, Jonathan. I'm afraid that no matter what we do, people will always see the worst in us, in you. I know what this company meant to my father, and I want to honor that, but it's hard to stay strong when it feels like the world is watching, waiting for us to fail." Jonathan reached out, placing his hand over hers. "People will doubt, Emma. That's the nature of change. It scares people, and they'll resist it until they see proof. But we're building something that doesn't need their approval. It's not about them. It's about us, our values, and what we're leaving behind. And as for your father, I believe he would be incredibly proud of what you've done, of the strength you've shown. I know I am." Emma felt a lump rise in her throat. She hadn't allowed herself to think too much about her father lately, fearing that memories of him would make her feel even more vulnerable. But Jonathan's words brought a sense of comfort and validation that she hadn't realized she needed. She nodded, her resolve strengthening. "You're right. This isn't about proving anything to anyone else. It's about making a difference. If my father could stand by his values, even when it cost him everything, then I can too." Jonathan smiled, a look of pride in his eyes. "That's the Emma I know." Over the next few weeks, Emma's determination helped her weather the storm of attention and criticism. The media's fascination with Jonathan's rebirth began to wane, and with each day, more employees started to believe in the new vision he and Emma were cultivating. They implemented programs to support their workers, offering education assistance, healthcare benefits, and mental wellness resources. Slowly, a shift in the company culture began to take root as people felt valued and empowered in a way they hadn't before. But one of the most profound changes came when Emma suggested a company-wide Integrity Day. Inspired by the values her father had instilled in her, the idea was simple: a day for employees to volunteer in the community, engaging in acts of kindness and charity that were close to their hearts. To Emma's surprise, Jonathan not only supported the idea but insisted that he and the entire executive team lead by example. On the first Integrity Day, Jonathan and Emma joined hundreds of employees in a local community project to rebuild a playground in a low-income neighborhood. They worked side by side with their staff, painting fences, planting flowers, and assembling new play structures. The experience was transformative, not only for Jonathan and Emma, but for everyone involved. There was a sense of unity and purpose that transcended corporate titles and pay grades. That evening, as they stood back to admire their work, Jonathan looked at Emma with a smile that was both exhausted and deeply satisfied. "I never thought I'd feel this way," he admitted, wiping paint from his hands. "All those years, I thought success was about power and influence. But today, I felt like we truly accomplished something meaningful." Emma nodded, a look of contentment on her face. "This is what my father wanted. This is what he believed in. Helping people, lifting each other up. That's real success." The weeks following Integrity Day were filled with a renewed sense of energy and purpose at the company. Employees who had once been skeptical were now enthusiastic, inspired by the difference they were making. The board, once wary of the new direction, began to see the benefits in employee loyalty and public perception. Even the media's tone shifted, with articles praising the company's transformation and calling Jonathan's leadership a model for modern business ethics. For the first time in years, Jonathan felt truly fulfilled. He had built an empire, yes, but now he was building something far more significant, a legacy based on compassion, integrity, and a genuine desire to uplift others. And through it all, Emma remained his unwavering partner, guiding him back to the values he had once lost. Then, one evening, as they were wrapping up another long day at the office, Jonathan handed Emma a letter. It was an official document, outlining a 50% ownership stake in the company, offered to her as his equal partner. Emma was stunned, her hands trembling as she held the paper. "Jonathan, I don't know what to say. This is too much." He smiled, his eyes kind. "Emma, I've learned so much from you, more than I ever thought possible. You've shown me a new way to live and lead. This company is as much yours as it is mine. Together, we'll carry forward the values your father stood for, and we'll continue to make a difference." Tears filled Emma's eyes, but she managed a grateful smile. "Thank you, Jonathan. I promise I'll do everything I can to honor him." As they shook hands, they both understood the depth of the commitment they were making, not just to each other, but to everyone who had believed in them, and the people whose lives they would touch in the future. Together, they were no longer just business partners. They were two individuals bound by a shared vision, a belief in goodness, and a legacy that would outlive them both. As Emma and Jonathan embarked on this final phase of their journey together, the weight of their shared commitment became more tangible. They weren't merely business partners. They had forged a unique bond rooted in trust, integrity, and an unyielding desire to leave the world a better place than they had found it. They both understood that while they had made immense progress, this was only the beginning of something much larger than themselves. In the months following Jonathan's decision to make Emma his equal partner, the company began to see unprecedented growth. But this was a different kind of growth, one that wasn't solely reflected in profits or market share, but in the trust and loyalty of their employees, the gratitude of the communities they served, and the positive press that praised the company's ethical transformation. For the first time in his career, Jonathan wasn't chasing numbers on a spreadsheet. He was pursuing a legacy of compassion, empowerment, and social responsibility. However, with this newfound success came fresh challenges. Competitors took notice of their success and started spreading rumors, attempting to undermine Jonathan and Emma's credibility. Some claimed that the company's transformation was just a PR stunt to cover up previous unethical practices. Others hinted that Emma was nothing more than a figurehead and that Jonathan was still running the business with the same iron fist he had in the past. The whispers grew louder, and Jonathan knew they couldn't ignore them. One evening, Emma walked into Jonathan's office with a weary look on her face. "Jonathan, I think we need to address the rumors head-on. Our employees, the media, even some of our clients, they deserve to know the truth. We've built something beautiful here, and I don't want anyone to doubt its sincerity." Jonathan nodded, understanding her concern. "I agree, Emma. We've come too far to let others dictate the narrative. But how do we prove that what we're doing is genuine? Words alone won't be enough." Emma's eyes lit up with an idea. "What if we open our doors? Let people see for themselves. We could host an event. Invite our employees, clients, community leaders, and even the media. They'll get to see our work, meet the people whose lives we're impacting, and hear firsthand stories of how this transformation has changed the company from the inside out." Jonathan thought about it for a moment, then smiled. "An open house. I like it. It's bold, transparent, and more importantly, it aligns with everything we stand for now. Let's do it." Over the next few weeks, they poured their energy into planning the event. It wasn't just a typical corporate open house. It was a celebration of the values that Emma's father had instilled in her and the ethical rebirth that Jonathan had committed to. They invited employees from all levels of the company, community members who had benefited from their initiatives, clients who had supported their vision, and journalists who had followed their journey from the beginning. On the day of the event, the company's headquarters was transformed. Each floor was dedicated to a different aspect of their mission. One area showcased the community projects they had funded, another highlighted employee benefits and wellness programs, and a third featured their environmental sustainability efforts. There were booths where employees shared their personal stories of how the company's transformation had impacted their lives, and clients spoke about the renewed trust and respect they felt in their partnership with the business. Emma and Jonathan moved through the crowd together, speaking with guests and answering questions. Emma noticed how Jonathan's demeanor had changed since they started this journey. The guarded, skeptical businessman she had first met was now open, warm, and genuinely interested in connecting with people on a personal level. He listened intently, asked thoughtful questions, and even shared his own struggles with vulnerability. As they made their way to the main stage for the keynote speech, Emma felt a wave of pride. She looked at Jonathan, who gave her an encouraging nod. They were in this together, and she knew they were about to make a powerful statement. Standing on stage, Jonathan addressed the audience with a sense of humility and gratitude that resonated deeply. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice steady and sincere. "This company's journey over the past year has been a challenging one, but it's also been transformative. We set out to create something that went beyond profits and success. We wanted to build a place where people felt valued, where our actions matched our words, and where integrity wasn't just a buzzword. It was a way of life." He paused, glancing at Emma with a look of gratitude. "I couldn't have done this alone. Emma has been the guiding force behind this change. Her unwavering commitment to honesty, compassion, and resilience reminded me of what truly matters. She taught me that success without integrity is empty, and that wealth means nothing if it doesn't uplift others." Emma felt her cheeks flush as the audience applauded. She hadn't expected Jonathan to place so much credit on her shoulders, but his words filled her with a deep sense of validation. She stepped forward, taking the microphone. When Jonathan offered me a job as his personal assistant, I thought it was just a chance to support my family and make a difference in a small way. But over time, I realized that I was part of something much larger. We're building a legacy here, a legacy that I hope will inspire others to believe in the power of integrity, compassion, and selflessness. As she spoke, she saw faces in the audience light up, nodding in agreement. She continued, "This journey hasn't been easy, and we've faced our share of challenges. But we're here today, stronger and more united than ever, because we believe in the values that guide us. And I believe that, together, we can continue to make a difference." The applause was thunderous, but more than that, there was a sense of unity and hope that permeated the room. Journalists wrote notes, employees beamed with pride, and clients looked on with admiration. Emma and Jonathan had accomplished what they had set out to do. They had proven that their transformation was real, that they were committed to a higher purpose, and that they were willing to be held accountable. As the evening wound down, Emma and Jonathan stood by the doors, thanking people for attending. Many guests approached them with tears in their eyes, sharing personal stories and expressing gratitude for the company's positive impact. It was a humbling experience, and both Emma and Jonathan felt a renewed sense of purpose. After the last guest had left, Emma and Jonathan sat together in the empty lobby, exhausted but content. Jonathan looked at her, his eyes filled with a warmth she hadn't seen before. "Emma," he said softly, "you've changed my life in ways I never thought possible. You've given me a reason to believe in people again, and for that, I'll always be grateful." Emma smiled, reaching over to squeeze his hand. "And you've given me a chance to carry on my father's legacy. I think he'd be proud of us, Jonathan. I really do." They sat in comfortable silence, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. They both knew that there would be more challenges ahead, but they also knew that they had the strength, trust, and determination to face them together. As they left the office that night, they walked out not just as partners, but as friends bound by a shared vision, a vision of a world where honesty, compassion, and resilience could triumph over cynicism and greed. They were ready to build a legacy that would outlast them, a legacy that would inspire others to choose integrity over ambition and kindness over power. And as they walked into the quiet, starlit night, Emma knew that her father's spirit was with them, guiding them forward. In that moment, she realized that she hadn't just found a job or a mentor. She had found a purpose, a family, and a future filled with hope.